On a humid summer evening in July 1972, 24-year-old Caroline Hayes walked home from her job at a small printing shop in downtown Indianapolis. Caroline was known for her meticulous work ethic, her warmth toward colleagues, and her commitment to community volunteering, especially tutoring local children in reading. That evening, she had planned to meet a friend for a brief dinner before returning home to her apartment on the east side of the city. She never arrived. Her absence was noticed almost immediately. Caroline's roommate, expecting her back by 8 p.m., attempted to reach her by phone with no answer. The next morning, concerned colleagues and friends contacted the Indianapolis Police Department. Detective Margaret Sinclair, assigned to the case, immediately recognized that Caroline's disappearance was unusual. Reliable, punctual, and cautious by nature, Caroline had left no indication that she intended to vanish. The initial investigation faced immediate challenges. In 1972, surveillance technology was minimal, and few cameras captured public streets. Witnesses were scarce, and early reports included only vague recollections: a man seen lingering near the printing shop that evening and a dark car parked along an adjacent street. Detective Sinclair took careful notes, preserving every scrap of information in case the investigation went cold, which it eventually did after weeks with no leads. Caroline's family, including her parents Helen and Richard Hayes, quickly became central to the search efforts. Flyers were posted across Indianapolis, and local newspapers ran stories about her disappearance. Friends and colleagues organized community searches and awareness campaigns, keeping her story alive. Despite their efforts, days turned into weeks with no sign of Caroline, and the trail seemed to vanish. Decades passed, and Caroline's disappearance became a cold case. In 2023, the Indiana State Police Cold Case Unit reopened her investigation. Detective Laura Benton, known for her meticulous attention to detail, reviewed every note, photograph, and piece of evidence preserved from 1972. Physical evidence previously deemed inconclusive, fibers, partial fingerprints, and trace hair samples, was re-examined using modern forensic methods. DNA testing became the critical breakthrough. Hair fragments collected from near the printing shop were successfully sequenced. Partial fingerprints were matched against national databases, revealing a connection to Samuel Corbett, a man with a prior history of minor offenses in the Indianapolis area during the early 1970s. Corbett had resided and worked near Caroline's usual path, placing him in proximity during the critical time frame. Witnesses from 1972 were re-interviewed using cognitive enhancement techniques designed to retrieve faded memories. A neighbor recalled a tall man standing near the alley behind the printing shop shortly after Caroline left. A local delivery driver remembered a dark sedan parked on the street, its driver watching the area. Though decades had passed, consistent recollections aligned with forensic evidence, allowing investigators to reconstruct Caroline's last known movements. The Cold Case Unit created a detailed timeline of Caroline's final day. She left the printing shop at 7:45 p.m., intending to walk to a friend's apartment. Corbett's movements, verified through employment and residential records, positioned him near her route multiple times. Each confirmed location strengthened the case, forming a pattern that investigators could analyze with modern methods. Investigators examined Corbett's former residences and storage spaces. Clothing and personal items recovered contained fibers consistent with those found in the alley behind the printing shop. Hair fragments matching Caroline's DNA were also discovered among his possessions. Individually, these pieces seemed minor, but collectively they formed a clear connection between Corbett and Caroline's disappearance. Interrogation was approached carefully. Detective Benton presented Corbett with the collected evidence: DNA matches, fiber comparisons, fingerprints, and corroborated witness statements. Corbett initially denied involvement, claiming that his presence in the area was coincidental. Investigators observed inconsistencies in his statements and hesitations in his recounting of events. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted to being in the vicinity, but attempted to minimize the nature of his actions. Spatial analysis became a critical tool. Investigators mapped Corbett's movements alongside Caroline's reconstructed path, highlighting intersections where evidence was found. Behavioral patterns from Corbett's past, including previous minor offenses and suspicious activity, helped contextualize his presence and potential involvement. The reconstructed timeline provided investigators with a precise understanding of the events that evening. Community involvement was vital. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues contributed personal recollections of Caroline's habits, routines, and personality. Their input helped validate witness statements and allowed investigators to interpret forensic evidence within the context of her life. This approach ensured the investigation remained centered on Caroline's story, not just the crime scene. Every piece of evidence underwent rigorous re-examination. DNA was retested for accuracy, fibers were independently verified, and fingerprints were analyzed using the latest forensic technology. Meticulous documentation ensured that all evidence would be admissible in court, capable of withstanding scrutiny during trial. Investigators also analyzed Corbett's activities in the days surrounding Caroline's disappearance. Employment records, communications, and residential data were cross-referenced with witness accounts and physical evidence. This analysis confirmed opportunities for Corbett to have encountered Caroline and strengthened the reconstructed timeline. All materials were organized for prosecutorial review. Visual reconstructions, maps, and chronological timelines illustrated the sequence of events, ensuring that both investigators and future jurors could follow the case logically. The narrative emphasized forensic accuracy, emotional impact, and the human story behind Caroline's disappearance. Community engagement continued throughout the investigation. Residents followed updates closely, organized remembrance events, and provided any lingering details that might assist investigators. Their involvement helped maintain public attention and reinforce the importance of persistence in cold cases. Caroline's parents, Helen and Richard Hayes, played an essential role in verifying the reconstructed timeline. Their detailed knowledge of her routines, daily habits, and typical behaviors provided crucial context for interpreting witness statements and evidence. Their testimony also emphasized the human element, keeping the investigation focused on Caroline as a person, not just a missing case. Investigators systematically examined alternative explanations for her disappearance. Misidentification, coincidence, or errors in evidence were carefully ruled out. The combination of forensic testing, eyewitness accounts, and reconstructed timelines produced a coherent, compelling case against Corbett. Detective Benton stressed the importance of detailed documentation and patience. Every note, every fiber, every statement mattered, she said. Even decades later, they formed the foundation for uncovering the truth. Her dedication exemplified the philosophy of the Cold Case Unit. Persistence, scientific rigor, and methodical analysis could bring long-delayed justice. By 2024, the Cold Case Unit had compiled a complete and verified case against Samuel Corbett. Every aspect of Caroline Hayes' disappearance was reconstructed and corroborated. Physical evidence, witness testimony, behavioral analysis, and Corbett's partial admissions combined to form a compelling, legally robust case. The stage was set for prosecution, promising resolution to a decades-old mystery. Caroline's story, once obscured by time and uncertainty, had been illuminated through science, diligence, and perseverance. Preserved evidence, re-examined with modern techniques, transformed a cold case into a pathway for justice. The narrative emphasized both the human impact of her loss and the meticulous investigative process that finally brought clarity. Once Samuel Corbett was identified as a person of interest, the Cold Case Unit intensified its investigation with meticulous care. Detective Laura Benton reconstructed the night of July 14, 1972, using every preserved note, photograph, and piece of physical evidence from the original case file. Though decades had passed, careful preservation allowed investigators to piece together a precise sequence of events that would later prove critical in court. Corbett's movements were analyzed using employment records, residential histories, and other available documentation. Witnesses from 1972 were re-interviewed using cognitive enhancement techniques designed to recover faded memories. A neighbor recalled seeing a tall man loitering near the alley behind the printing shop shortly after Caroline left. A local delivery driver remembered a dark vehicle parked along the street, its driver seemingly observing the building. Though decades old, these recollections were remarkably consistent and aligned with preserved forensic evidence. Physical evidence was pivotal. Fibers collected from the alley behind the printing shop matched materials from Corbett's clothing. Hair fragments preserved for decades were successfully sequenced and confirmed to belong to Caroline Hayes. Partial fingerprints recovered at the scene were reanalyzed with modern technology, placing Corbett at key locations during the evening in question. Each piece of evidence, though small alone, collectively formed a compelling chain linking him to Caroline's disappearance. Investigators searched Corbett's former residences and storage units. Clothing and personal items contained fibers consistent with those found near the alley, and hair fragments matching Caroline's DNA were recovered from his possessions. This combination of evidence, reinforced by meticulous documentation, created a clear, legally defensible connection between Corbett and Caroline. Interrogation was conducted with strategic precision. Detective Benton presented Corbett with the accumulated evidence: DNA matches, fiber comparisons, fingerprints, and corroborated witness statements. Corbett initially denied involvement, asserting that his presence near the printing shop was coincidental. Investigators noted inconsistencies and hesitations in his recounting of events. Faced with the weight of evidence, he admitted being in the area, but attempted to minimize the nature of his actions. Investigators mapped Corbett's movements alongside Caroline's reconstructed path, highlighting intersections supported by witness accounts and physical evidence. Behavioral patterns from his past, including prior minor offenses and suspicious activity, were used to contextualize his presence. The reconstructed timeline provided a comprehensive understanding of the night's events. Community input remained essential. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues shared memories of Caroline's routines, habits, and personality. These insights helped validate witness statements and provided context for interpreting forensic evidence. The investigation emphasized Caroline's life and character, ensuring she remained central to the narrative. All forensic evidence underwent rigorous re-examination. DNA was retested multiple times to confirm accuracy, fibers were independently verified, and fingerprints were analyzed with advanced techniques. Meticulous documentation ensured that every item could withstand scrutiny in court. Reinforcing the credibility of the investigation, Corbett's activities in the days surrounding Caroline's disappearance were scrutinized. Employment records, communications, and residential data were cross-referenced with witness accounts and physical evidence, confirming multiple opportunities for Corbett to encounter Caroline. This detailed reconstruction strengthened the prosecution's case and ensured that every angle was accounted for. The cold case unit prepared all findings for prosecutorial review. Maps, timelines, and visual reconstructions were assembled to clearly illustrate the sequence of events. The narrative combined scientific accuracy with human impact, emphasizing the persistence of investigators and the enduring significance of Caroline's life. Community engagement continued throughout the process. Local residents organized remembrance events, provided any lingering recollections, and maintained attention on the case. This support not only assisted investigators, but reinforced the importance of persistence in solving long unsolved cases. Caroline's parents, Helen and Richard Hayes, contributed critical insights to the timeline. Their detailed knowledge of her daily habits, routines, and behavior validated witness accounts and aligned with physical evidence. Their testimony also underscored the emotional stakes, highlighting the personal impact of the crime and the significance of resolving it after decades of uncertainty. Investigators systematically eliminated alternative explanations for Caroline's disappearance. Misidentification, coincidental evidence, and errors in analysis were carefully reviewed and ruled out. The combination of DNA testing, fiber analysis, fingerprint evidence, and corroborated witness accounts produced a coherent, compelling narrative. Detective Benton emphasized the importance of diligence. Every note, every fiber, every statement mattered. Even decades later, they formed the foundation for uncovering the truth. Her commitment exemplified the cold case unit's philosophy. Persistence, scientific rigor, and methodical investigation could deliver justice for cases long thought unsolvable. By 2024, investigators had compiled a fully verified case against Samuel Corbett. Every detail of Caroline Hayes' disappearance was reconstructed and corroborated. Physical evidence, behavioral analysis, witness testimony, and Corbett's partial admissions formed a compelling, legally robust case ready for trial. Caroline's story, once obscured by decades of uncertainty, had been illuminated through science, perseverance, and community involvement. Preserved evidence, re-examined with modern methods, transformed a cold case into a path toward justice. The narrative emphasized both scientific precision and the human story behind her disappearance. The reconstructed timeline, combined with witness accounts and forensic findings, provided a clear chronological sequence of events. Jurors would later be able to follow the investigation logically, understanding the connections between Corbett and Caroline, and seeing the culmination of decades of meticulous work. Through tireless dedication, the cold case unit had not only identified a suspect but also verified the events surrounding Caroline's disappearance. Every decision, every investigative step, was aimed at preserving the integrity of the case and ensuring that, when it reached the courtroom, justice could be served without compromise. Caroline Hayes' story demonstrated that even when a disappearance seems unsolvable, dedication, patience, and the application of modern forensic science can uncover the truth. The persistence of her family, community, and investigators ensured that no detail was overlooked and that every potential lead was pursued. By combining historical evidence with modern investigative techniques, the cold case unit transformed uncertainty into accountability, bringing clarity to a case long shrouded in shadows. The courthouse in Indianapolis was heavy with anticipation, a mixture of decades-long grief and the promise of justice finally arriving. Friends, family, and community members filled the benches, each carrying the weight of uncertainty that had shadowed them since 1972. In the front row, Helen and Richard Hayes sat silently, holding hands and bracing for the moment that had been postponed for more than 50 years. The long wait for closure was about to end. The trial began with the prosecution humanizing Caroline Hayes, presenting her not just as a missing person but as a vibrant, intelligent, and compassionate woman whose life had been tragically interrupted. Witnesses described her dedication to her work at the printing shop, her tutoring and mentoring of children, and her warm, conscientious personality. The jury was reminded that this was about a life that mattered, a community that grieved, and a family who had persisted against decades of uncertainty. Detective Laura Benton testified to the reconstructed timeline of July 14, 1972. Caroline had left the printing shop around 7:45 p.m., intending to meet a friend. Samuel Corbett's confirmed presence in the area, corroborated through employment and residential records, placed him in proximity during the critical time window. Visual reconstructions illustrated her route, locations where evidence was recovered, and Corbett's movements, providing jurors with a clear understanding of how events unfolded. Forensic experts presented their findings. Dr. Jonathan Hayes, no relation, explained the fiber analysis linking Corbett's clothing to the alley behind the printing shop. Hair fragments preserved for decades were confirmed to be Caroline's through modern DNA testing. Partial fingerprints were analyzed and matched to Corbett. Each expert detailed how decades-old evidence, once considered inconclusive, was now definitive thanks to advanced forensic technology. Witnesses from 1972 provided accounts that had never wavered. The cafe worker who had noticed a tall man lingering near the alley testified once again, and the delivery driver recounted seeing a dark sedan parked suspiciously on the street. Though memories had faded, the consistency across testimonies reinforced Corbett's presence and actions on that fateful evening. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the reliability of decades-old evidence and memories. They questioned whether fibers and hair could have transferred innocently, and whether witness recollections were sufficiently accurate after so many years. The prosecution countered by presenting thorough documentation, independent verification of forensic evidence, and cognitive-enhanced witness statements. Their argument was precise. Time had preserved the evidence, not eroded it. Helen and Richard Hayes testified about Caroline's daily routines and personality traits. Helen described Caroline's conscientious nature and methodical habits, while Richard recounted her interactions within the community and her predictable routines. Their testimony emphasized that the case was about the loss of a person with a life and a legacy, rather than a mere abstract crime. Behavioral analysis of Corbett was introduced to provide context. Prior suspicious behaviors, patterns of minor offenses, and documented loitering near public spaces helped jurors understand the likelihood of his interactions with Caroline. While these details did not serve as direct proof of guilt, they helped paint a full picture of the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Evidence was presented visually, with timelines, maps, and reconstruction diagrams illustrating how Corbett's movements intersected with Caroline's final path and aligned with physical evidence. Jurors could follow the progression logically, seeing how forensic science and witness accounts converged to form a coherent narrative. Corbett's repeated denials and inconsistent statements were confronted systematically. Investigators highlighted discrepancies between his testimony and verified evidence. Each fiber match, DNA connection, and fingerprint link built a chain of accountability that was impossible to ignore. After days of testimony, the jury began deliberations. They reviewed forensic reports, witness statements, visual timelines, and the reconstructed sequence of events. Hours later, the foreperson read aloud, "We, the jury, find the defendant Samuel Corbett guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping." The courtroom erupted with emotion. Helen and Richard Hayes wept openly. Relief mingled with sorrow as decades of uncertainty were finally replaced with accountability. Friends and neighbors embraced, acknowledging the perseverance that had brought truth to light after so many years. For a community that had carried the shadow of Caroline's disappearance for more than half a century, the verdict was vindication. The resolution of the case resonated beyond the courtroom. Media outlets highlighted the power of modern forensic science, the importance of preserving evidence, and the dedication of law enforcement and families in cold cases. Memorial services celebrated Caroline's life, emphasizing her contributions to the community, and her story became a symbol of hope for families enduring similar uncertainty. Helen and Richard Hayes became advocates for cold case reform, speaking publicly about the importance of meticulous evidence preservation and unwavering persistence. Their story inspired other families, demonstrating that time alone could not prevent justice from eventually being served. The Indianapolis Police Department also drew lessons from the case. Protocols for evidence storage, interagency cooperation, and systematic review of unresolved cases were strengthened. Caroline Hayes' case became an exemplar of how old evidence, preserved carefully and re-examined with modern tools, could resolve mysteries once thought unsolvable. Caroline's legacy extended into the community through scholarships, tutoring programs and mentorship initiatives established in her memory. Friends and family organized events to celebrate her life, ensuring that the impact she had on others would continue to inspire future generations. Her story became a lasting reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, perseverance and dedication could bring light. Detective Benton reflected on the case with quiet pride. Time cannot erase the truth. Every note, fiber, and witness statement mattered. This case shows that even decades-old mysteries can be solved, and justice can prevail through diligence, science, and unwavering commitment. Her words underscored the broader significance of the case, illustrating the power of persistence, forensic science, and community collaboration. The streets of Indianapolis, which had once been silent witnesses to Caroline's disappearance, now stood as symbols of resilience and justice. The collaboration between law enforcement, family, and community ensured that her memory was preserved and that the truth emerged despite decades of silence. Decades of uncertainty were replaced with clarity. The resolution of Caroline Hayes' case proved that patience, thorough investigation, and modern forensic science could overcome time and doubt, ensuring that no crime remained unresolved, no matter how long it had been left in the shadows. Caroline's story is a testament to hope, perseverance, and the enduring power of justice. Her life, contributions, and the tireless efforts of those who refused to give up ensured that her story would inspire others to continue seeking truth, preserving memory, and holding perpetrators accountable. Through her legacy, it is clear that time may pass, but justice can prevail, and the lives of victims will never be forgotten.